The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, before Elena Vance even had time to flinch. The sound was a crisp, violent punctuation mark in the middle of the bride's laughter. Elena stood frozen near the grand piano, her worn leather appraisal kit clutched against her chest like a shield, as a dozen pairs of eyes turned to look at her. The liquid soaked into the hem of her simple navy dress, and a shard of glass glittered near her scuffed flat shoe. The bride, Valentina Conti, a woman sculpted by Pilates and privilege, pressed a manicured hand to her chest in mock apology. Her smile was a slash of red lipstick. "Oh, I am so terribly clumsy," Valentina said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "But really, you shouldn't have been standing so close. It's a bit of a tight squeeze behind the piano, isn't it?" For some, a ripple of cruel, polite laughter moved through the cluster of bridesmaids and wealthy socialites. Elena felt the familiar heat crawl up her neck, a burn that had nothing to do with the champagne. She was a size 20, in a room full of women who treated a size 4 as a moral failing. Her curves, her soft stomach, her full hips, her heavy arms. Every part of her felt like an accusation in this penthouse of sharp angles and cold marble. She had been summoned here, to the Moretti family's private Chicago residence, as a last-minute replacement. The original appraiser, a man with a reputation as sharp as his suits, had suffered a sudden, convenient bout of food poisoning. Elena's mentor, an old man who knew her genius but not her face, had sent her. He'd said the Moretti family needed the best. He hadn't warned her that the best would be treated like a stray animal that had wandered in from the rain. "I apologize for the disruption," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. She had learned long ago that anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. Dignity was her only currency. She knelt down, her knees protesting on the hard floor, and began to carefully pick up the larger pieces of glass. The room watched her, a silent, judgmental audience. She could feel their stares on the broad expanse of her back, on the way her dress strained slightly across her shoulders. "Don't bother with that," a sharp voice cut through the murmur. It was Chiara, Valentina's sister and maid of honor, a woman with cheekbones that could cut glass. "The staff will get it. We didn't bring you here to bleed on the floor. We brought you to look at a rock. Though I'm not sure why they sent someone so substantial. Surely there's a lot of bending over in your line of work. Must be exhausting." Elena's jaw tightened. She placed the shards on a passing server's tray and rose slowly, her body feeling heavier than it ever had. She met Chiara's gaze directly. "I find that the quality of an appraisal has very little to do with the appraiser's dress size, ma'am, and everything to do with their eye." Chiara's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, surprised by the quiet steel in the other woman's voice. Before she could retort, the heavy atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a subtle change, a drop in temperature, a sudden hush that fell over the chattering guests. The security men stationed by the elevator straightened almost imperceptibly. Elena felt it before she saw him, a presence that sucked the air out of the vast, glittering space. Dante Moretti walked into the room. He wasn't a man who entered a space. He was a man who took command of it. He was tall, with the lean, coiled power of a predator. His dark hair was swept back from a face that was all sharp planes and controlled intensity. His eyes, the color of winter slate, swept the room with a cold, assessing gaze that missed nothing. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and the only hint of his true nature was the quiet, deadly stillness in his posture. This was not a businessman. This was a man who had inherited an empire, built on shadows and steel, the boss of the Moretti family. The chatter resumed, but it was more subdued now, a performance for his benefit. Valentina's entire demeanor transformed. The cruelty vanished, replaced by a radiant, practiced warmth. She glided towards him, her silk dress whispering against the floor. "Dante, darling, you're just in time. We were about to have the ring appraised. Though, I must say, the replacement they sent is unexpected." She gestured dismissively towards Elena, her meaning clear. Dante's gaze followed the gesture and landed on Elena. For a long, terrifying moment, he simply looked at her. His eyes didn't slide over her with the same dismissive disgust as the others. They lingered. They took in the champagne stain on her dress, the rigid set of her shoulders, the quiet, wounded pride in her eyes. He saw the broken glass on the floor, the server nervously mopping it up. He saw the cruel little smiles on the faces of the women around him, and he understood everything in a single, damning instant. "Is there a problem?" His voice was low, a quiet baritone that resonated in the sudden silence. It wasn't a question asked out of concern. It was a demand for an explanation. "No problem at all, Mr. Moretti," Elena said quickly, before anyone else could speak. She would not be a snitch. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her complain. "A minor accident. I'm ready to begin the appraisal whenever the bride is ready." Dante's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't believe her. He saw the quiet dignity in her refusal to name her tormentors, and it intrigued him. In his world, people begged for his protection. This woman, who had clearly been targeted, asked for nothing. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Proceed." Valentina, momentarily thrown by the lack of a public execution, recovered quickly. She clapped her hands. "Yes, let's get this over with. The ring, Chiara." Chiara, with a theatrical flourish, produced a black velvet box from a locked drawer in a sideboard. She placed it on the grand piano. With a reverent thud, the room fell silent. This was the moment. The legendary Moretti engagement ring. It was a 10-carat, old mine-cut diamond, set in platinum, a stone that had been in the family for 4 generations. It was said to be priceless, not just for its clarity, but for its history. Elena approached the piano. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. This was her sanctuary. The world of light and refraction, of inclusions and angles, was a place where her body didn't matter, where her mind was the only tool that counted. She opened her kit, a worn leather case that held a loop, a pair of tweezers, a refractometer, and a small, powerful pen light. She could feel Dante Moretti's eyes on her, a physical weight. She ignored it. She pulled on a pair of white cotton gloves, her movements precise and economical. Valentina watched with a bored expression, tapping a finger on her champagne glass. "Do be careful with it. It's worth more than your entire bloodline." Elena didn't respond. She picked up the ring. The moment her gloved fingers touched the metal, a faint, discordant note sounded in her mind. It was a feeling, an instinct honed over thousands of hours of study. The platinum was too light. The setting was a masterful reproduction, but the prongs had a microscopic, modern tool mark that shouldn't have been there on a century-old piece. A cold dread began to pool in her stomach. She brought the loupe to her eye and focused on the stone. The world narrowed to a universe of light and carbon. She tilted the diamond, searching for the unique fingerprint of a natural stone. The tiny crystal inclusions, the subtle graining, the way light fractured and danced within its depths. What she saw made her blood run cold. The stone was too perfect. The brilliance was synthetic, a harsh, uniform sparkle that lacked the soul of a natural diamond. She saw a faint, telltale line of a flux-grown synthetic, a secret only visible to an expert eye under specific light. This was a cubic zirconia of exceptional quality, or perhaps a lab-grown diamond designed to deceive. It was a fake, a brilliant, audacious, catastrophic fake. But her horror deepened. Her talent, the thing that made her a prodigy, wasn't just identifying fakes. It was her encyclopedic, photographic memory for historical gems. She had studied the Moretti diamonds file, a confidential document from a European gemological institute, years ago. The real stone had a unique, internal characteristic: a tiny, perfectly formed, triangular crystal inclusion near the culate. A feature so rare, it was called a dragon's tear. It was invisible to the naked eye, but under magnification, it was a secret signature. This fake had no such inclusion. But more than that, the real Moretti diamond had a secret that went beyond gemology. The original patriarch, a paranoid man, had used a microscopic laser to inscribe a family code onto the girdle of the diamond. It was a sequence of numbers and letters that corresponded to a hidden ledger, a key to the family's oldest, most protected assets. The file had mentioned a historical inscription, but only Elena's mentor knew she had deciphered its true meaning. The fake stone had a flawless, unmarked girdle. The real diamond hadn't just been stolen for its monetary value. It had been stolen for the code, and someone in this room was a traitor. Elena lowered the loupe. Her face was pale, but her expression was a mask of professional calm. The room was waiting. Valentina was smirking. Well, is it as magnificent as they say? Or is it too much sparkle for your simple tastes? Elena took a deep breath. She had a choice. She could lie, say the stone was genuine, collect her fee, and disappear. She could avoid the storm that was about to break. But her integrity, the one thing she valued more than her safety, wouldn't allow it. She looked past Valentina, directly at Dante Moretti. His eyes were already on her, and they had sharpened. He had seen the flicker of shock, the moment of dread, the instant of decision on her face. He knew something was wrong. "Mr. Moretti," Elena said, her voice clear and unwavering, cutting through the room's expectant silence. "This ring is a forgery. The diamond is a fake. The real Moretti diamond has been stolen." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Valentina's smirk froze, then shattered into a mask of fury. "You lying fat cow!" she shrieked, her composure gone. "How dare you? This is an outrage! Dante, have this pathetic woman thrown out. She's clearly incompetent, or she's trying to run some kind of con." Chiara and the other women erupted in a chorus of indignant agreement, their voices a cacophony of insults. "Security!" Chiara yelled. Two large men in suits started to move towards Elena. Elena stood her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her gaze fixed on Dante. She held the ring up, the fake diamond catching the light. "I can prove it," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "with a simple test. A test any real diamond would pass, and this one will fail." Dante raised a hand. The gesture was small, almost lazy, but the security men stopped instantly. The room fell silent again. He hadn't taken his eyes off Elena. He saw the truth in her. Not just the truth about the ring, but the truth of her courage. She was terrified. He could see the rapid pulse in her throat, but she didn't back down. She was a lone, curvy woman in a simple dress, standing against a room full of vipers, armed with nothing but the truth. "Proceed," he said, the single word a command that brooked no argument. Elena walked over to the grand piano and picked up a crystal water glass. She filled it halfway from a pitcher. "A diamond has a very high thermal conductivity," she explained, her voice taking on the calm, instructive tone she used with apprentices. "It disperses heat instantly. A fake, like cubic zirconia, is a thermal insulator." She held the ring by the band and breathed heavily on the large central stone, fogging it with a cloud of condensation. Then, she immediately plunged the stone into the cold water. She pulled it out, The stone remained fogged for a full 3 seconds before the mist began to clear. A real diamond would have cleared almost instantaneously. A genuine diamond would have shed that fog in a fraction of a second, Elena said, placing the ring back on the velvet box. This is a fake. A very good one, but a fake nonetheless. A collective gasp went through the room. The evidence was undeniable. Valentina's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage and panic. This proves nothing. It's a parlor trick. She's lying. But no one was listening to her anymore. All eyes were on Dante Moretti. The cold, controlled fury on his face was more terrifying than any shout. He walked slowly towards the piano, his footsteps echoing on the marble. He didn't look at the ring. He looked at Elena. "You knew?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The moment you touched it, you knew. It wasn't a question." "Yes," Elena whispered. "And you know more," he pressed, his eyes boring into hers. "What else did you see?" Elena hesitated. The code, the secret inscription. If she revealed that, she would be stepping into a world of unimaginable danger. She would be a target. But looking into Dante Moretti's eyes, so she knew he would not let her leave without the full truth. "The real stone," she said, her voice barely audible, "has a microscopic inscription on its girdle, a family code. This one is blank. The theft wasn't just for the stone's value. It was for the information it contains." Dante's expression didn't change, but something terrifying and absolute shifted in the depths of his eyes. He turned his head slowly, his gaze landing on Valentina. The bride took a step back, her bravado crumbling into sheer terror. "Dante, I don't know what she's talking about. I swear, my father gave you that ring. It's been in my family's vault for weeks." "Your father," Dante said, his voice a silken, deadly whisper, "gave me a fake. And you, my dear fiancé, have been parading a lie in front of my family. You have made me look weak. You have made me look like a fool." He took another step towards her. "Where is the real diamond?" "I don't know," Valentina sobbed, all her beauty contorted by fear. "I swear I don't know." Dante looked at his head of security, a grim-faced man named Marco. "Take Ms. Conti and her sister to the study. They are not to leave." Marco nodded, and he and another guard gently but irresistibly took the two now weeping women by the arms and led them away. The other guests stood frozen, a tableau of shock and terror. Dante addressed them without turning around. "The engagement party is over. You will all leave now. You will speak of this to no one. If I hear a single whisper, I will know where it came from." The room emptied in a silent, terrified rush. Within 60 seconds, Elena was alone with Dante Moretti and his silent security detail. The vast penthouse felt even larger and infinitely more dangerous. Dante turned back to her. He walked closer, stopping just a foot away. He was so tall she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The scent of him, expensive cologne and cold winter air, filled her senses. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elena Vance," she managed to say. "Elena," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "You have done me a great service tonight. You have exposed a betrayal that cuts to the heart of my family, and you have done it with more courage and intelligence than anyone in my organization." He reached out and, with a gentleness that shocked her, took her hand. He turned it over, looking at her palm, at the faint calluses from years of handling tools. "These are the hands of someone who works, who sees, who tells the truth." He looked back up at her face. Everyone in that room saw a shiny object. "You saw the truth. That is a rare and dangerous gift, Elena Vance." Elena's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever looked at her like that. Not with pity, not with disgust, but with a profound, unnerving respect. It was more intoxicating and more frightening than anything she had ever experienced. "I was just doing my job, Mr. Moretti," she whispered. "No," he said, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "You did much more than that. You have made yourself invaluable to me. And in my world, that makes you the most protected and the most endangered woman in the city." He released her hand, and the loss of his touch felt like a physical blow. "You will not be returning to your apartment tonight. It's not safe. The people who stole that diamond will soon know that you are the one who can identify it. You will stay here, as my guest." The offer, or the command, felt like a door slamming shut, and another one opening into a dark, glittering abyss. Elena knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that her life had just changed forever. She had walked into a lion's den to appraise a ring, and she had caught the eye of the lion. The next morning, Elena woke in a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. The sheets were silk, the color of champagne, and the view of the Chicago skyline was a wall of glass and steel. A breakfast cart had been silently delivered, laden with fresh fruit, pastries, and a silver pot of coffee. Draped over a velvet chaise lounge was a dress, a deep emerald green wrap dress, in a fabric so soft it felt like water. A small, handwritten note lay on top. It read, simply, "For today, D." She didn't want to put it on. Putting it on felt like accepting a collar. But her own dress was still damp and stained with champagne, a sad, crumpled reminder of the previous night's humiliation. She showered in a bathroom made of white marble and gold fixtures, and when she finally slipped the green dress over her head, she gasped. It fit her perfectly. It didn't just fit. It celebrated her. The wrap style cinched at her waist, accentuating her hourglass shape. The V-neck was elegant. The sleeves flowed over her arms, and the fabric draped over her hips and stomach, without clinging or straining. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman she barely recognized. A woman who looked powerful, substantial, and beautiful. A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The door opened, and an older woman walked in. She was short and stout, with a helmet of silver hair and eyes that were the same winter slate color as Dante's. She wore a severe black dress, but her face, though lined, was not unkind. She leaned on a polished ebony cane. "So," the woman said, her voice a low, gravelly rasp, "you're the one who ruined my grandson's engagement party." "Good." Elena blinked, completely taken aback. I beg your pardon?" "I'm Elena Moretti," the woman said, walking further into the room and settling herself into an armchair with a grunt. "Dante's grandmother." And I said, "Good. Valentina Conti was a viper. Beautiful, yes, but a viper. I never liked her. She was marrying my grandson for his power, not his soul. You did us all a favor." Elena didn't know what to say. She stood awkwardly by the window. "I was just doing my job, Mrs. Moretti. Call me Gianna. And it was more than a job. You have the sight. I can tell. You see what's real." Gianna's sharp eyes swept over Elena, taking in the dress, the way she held herself. "Dante chose that dress. He has a good eye. He always did, for things of true value. He just gets distracted by shiny, sharp objects sometimes." She tapped her cane on the floor. "I remember the real ring, you know? I wore it for 40 years, before my son, Dante's father, gave it to his wife. It was heavy. It had a warmth to it. That cold, dead thing Valentina was flashing around. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw it. But nobody listens to an old woman." Elena's heart ached for her. "I'm sorry. It must be a terrible loss." "The ring is just a thing," Gianna said, waving a dismissive hand. "The code, however, that is the key to a vault in Zurich that holds the family's oldest secrets. Letters, treaties, Promises made 100 years ago. Things that hold the family together. Things that could tear it apart in the wrong hands. You are the only one who knows what to look for. That makes you the most important person in this building, Elena Vance. More important than me. More important than Dante, for the moment. The weight of her words settled on Elena's shoulders. I don't want any part of this. I just want to go home. Gianna laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Home? Child, you don't have a home anymore. The Conti family is already scrambling. They will blame you for their daughter's disgrace. And whoever masterminded this theft, someone far more clever than the Contis, will want to silence you. Your only home now is under Dante Moretti's protection. Don't be a fool. Accept it. Use it. You have a power now. Don't throw it away. Before Elena could answer, the door opened again, and Dante walked in. He was dressed in a black cashmere sweater and dark trousers, a more casual look that only served to emphasize the coiled power of his physique. His eyes went immediately to Elena, and something flickered in their depths. Satisfaction. Possession. The dress fits, he stated. It wasn't a question. It does, Elena said, her voice a little breathless. How did you know my size? I have an eye for detail, he said, his gaze traveling over her with a slow, deliberate appreciation that made her skin flush. And I had your coat from last night, a size 20, a beautiful, substantial size. It should be dressed accordingly. Gianna snorted from her chair. Stop intimidating the poor girl, Dante. She's had a long night. Come, tell us what you've learned from the Vipers. Dante's expression hardened. Valentina and Chiara are still claiming ignorance. They say the ring was in their father's vault, untouched. Their father, Franco Conti, is a known gambler with significant debts. It's possible he had a replica made to sell the original, hoping no one would notice. But he's not smart enough to know about the code. Someone else is pulling the strings. His eyes met Elena's. I need you. I need you to come with me to the Conti estate. I need you to look at Franco Conti's collection. See if there are any other fakes. See if you can find a trail. It was a request that was not a request. Elena knew that refusing was not an option. But a part of her, a part she barely recognized, didn't want to refuse. The woman in the mirror, the one in the emerald dress, was a woman who walked into danger, not away from it. All right, she said. I'll help you. The Conti estate was a sprawling mansion in the suburbs, a monument to new money and bad taste. Franco Conti, a sweaty, nervous man with a bulbous nose, met them in a grand foyer filled with gilded furniture and oversized paintings. His wife, a silent, brittle woman, stood behind him, wringing her hands. Dante, please! This is all a terrible misunderstanding, Franco blubbered. My Valentina would never— We would never. Be quiet, Franco, Dante said, his voice a silken threat. Miss Vance is going to look at your collection. You will give her full access. You will answer her questions. If you lie, I will know. Elena spent the next 2 hours in Franco's private study, a room lined with display cases. She examined watches, necklaces, brooches, and loose stones. Her initial scan was quick, her eyes and fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Most of it was genuine, if ostentatious. But then, in a case at the back, she found them. A pair of diamond cufflinks, a ruby pendant, a sapphire ring, all fakes, all brilliant, high-quality reproductions, made by the same hand as the fake Moretti diamond. She could see the same microscopic tool marks, the same synthetic brilliance. Mr. Conti, she said, her voice calm and clear, these 3 pieces are forgeries. They were made by the same counterfeiter who created the fake engagement ring. When did you acquire them? Franco's face went the color of old cheese. I don't. That's impossible. I bought them from a very reputable dealer in Antwerp. The dealer's name, Dante commanded, his presence filling the doorway. I don't remember. It was years ago. Franco was lying. Elena could see it in the frantic darting of his eyes. He was terrified, but not of Dante. He was terrified of someone else. Mr. Conti, Elena said, stepping closer to him. The person who made these is a master, but every master has a signature. I can trace this work. If you don't tell us who you're protecting, Mr. Moretti will find out anyway, and the consequences will be far worse for you and your daughters. The mention of his daughters broke him. His shoulders slumped, and he seemed to deflate. It was a private dealer, he whispered, his voice cracking. A man named Silas. He operates out of the back of a high-end jewelry store in the Diamond District. He doesn't ask questions. He just provides. I sold him the Moretti diamond 6 months ago. I was going to pay it back. I just needed a little time. He made the fake for me. But he must have sold the real one on. I didn't know about any code. I swear on my life. Dante's expression was unreadable. He turned to Marco, his security chief. Find Silas. Bring him to the warehouse. Gently. For now. Marco nodded and left. Dante turned back to Franco. You have brought shame and danger to my family, Franco. Your debt is now to me. You will sign over your shares in the Port Authority to my holding company. In exchange, your daughters will remain unharmed. Do you understand? Franco, weeping now, could only nod. As they walked out of the Conti estate, Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. The betrayal was deeper than a simple theft. It was a web, and they were just starting to pull on the first thread. That evening, back in the penthouse, Dante found Elena in the library. She was curled up in a massive leather armchair, a book on historical European gem cuts open in her lap. But she wasn't reading. She was staring into the fire. You did well today, he said, sitting in the chair opposite her. The firelight cast dancing shadows across his sharp features. You have a talent for interrogation. I just know when someone is lying about a stone, she said quietly. It's the only time I'm not afraid. Are you afraid of me? He asked, his voice low. Elena finally looked at him. Yes, she admitted, but not in the way you think. I'm not afraid you'll hurt me. I'm afraid of... She gestured vaguely around the opulent room. This world. This life. I'm afraid of getting used to silk sheets and custom-made dresses. I'm afraid of being seen. I've spent my whole life trying to be invisible, Mr. Moretti. It was safer that way. Dante leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. Invisible, he repeated, the word a low growl. Who told you that you should be invisible? Who made you feel that your presence, your body, your brilliance, was something to hide? The question, so direct and so protective, unlocked something inside her. Tears she hadn't even known she was holding back welled in her eyes. Everyone, she whispered. My whole life. The kids at school. The men who never looked twice. The women who looked at me with pity or disgust. The world is not built for women like me, Mr. Moretti. We are taught to take up less space, to apologize for our own existence. I'm good at my job because stones don't judge me. They just are what they are. A single tear spilled over and traced a path down her cheek. Dante moved. He was out of his chair and kneeling in front of her before she could blink. He didn't touch her, but his presence was overwhelming. Look at me, Elena, he commanded, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. She met his eyes. The world is full of fools, he said, his voice a fierce, quiet promise. They see a soft body, and they think it houses a weak spirit. They see curves, and they think of indulgence, not of strength. They are blind. I am not. I see a woman who walked into a room full of enemies and spoke a truth that would have made grown men weep with terror. I see a mind so sharp it can decipher the secrets of the earth. I see a body that is lush and powerful, and breathtakingly beautiful. You will never be invisible again, Elena. Not while I am alive. I will not allow it. He reached up and with the back of his fingers, gently brushed the tear from her cheek. The touch was electric, a shock of warmth and danger. You are under my protection now, and I protect what is mine. The word mine hung in the air between them, a vow and a threat. Elena's heart was a wild drum in her chest. She had never been claimed before. She had never been seen. And in the space of a single day, this dangerous, terrifying man had done both. The hunt for Silas took 3 days. Marco's men found him trying to flee the country, with a forged passport and a suitcase full of cash. They brought him to a nondescript warehouse on the south side, a place Dante used for conversations that required privacy. Dante insisted Elena be there. "You are the expert," he said. "I need you to verify what he tells us." The warehouse was cold and dimly lit. Silas, a thin, rat-faced man with nervous hands, was tied to a chair in the center of the concrete floor. He was terrified, babbling before anyone even asked a question. "I didn't know it was a Moretti stone. I swear. Conti just brought it to me. Said he needed a replica for insurance purposes. I didn't ask questions." Dante stood in the shadows, a silent, menacing presence. It was Marco who did the questioning, his voice a low, threatening monotone. "Who did you sell the real stone to, Silas?" "A broker. A middleman. I don't know his real name. He just calls himself the architect. He pays in cryptocurrency. He's the one who wanted the stone. He knew about it before Conti even contacted me. He had a buyer lined up, someone who wanted the code." Elena stepped forward, into the pool of light. She held up the fake Moretti ring. "This is your work?" she asked, her voice professional. Silas squinted at her, surprised. "Yeah, so what? It's a good job." "It's an exceptional job," Elena agreed. "Your laser work on the pavilion facets is some of the best I've ever seen. But you made a mistake on the girdle. The original had a micro-inscription. You left yours blank. Why?" Silas's face went pale. "What inscription?" "There was no inscription. I examined that stone under 200x magnification. There was nothing on the girdle." A cold, horrifying realization dawned on Elena. She turned to Dante, her face ashen. "He's telling the truth," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He didn't remove the code. It was never on the stone he received. Franco Conti didn't sell the real Moretti diamond to Silas. He sold him a fake. The real diamond was stolen long before it ever reached Conti's vault." The implication hit the room like a physical force. The betrayal was not a recent act of desperation by a gambling father. It was a cold, calculated, long-term plan. The real Moretti diamond had been gone for years, perhaps decades, and a perfect fake had been sitting in its place, waiting. The traitor was someone with long-term access to the family's most protected assets, someone inside the Moretti organization. Dante's face was a mask of icy fury. The controlled violence in his posture was more terrifying than any outburst. He turned and walked out of the warehouse without a word, leaving Marco to clean up the mess. Elena followed him to the car, her mind reeling. The danger had just multiplied tenfold. They weren't hunting a desperate jeweler. They were hunting a ghost, a phantom who had been one step ahead for a very long time. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Dante's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. When they arrived, he led her not to the main residence, but to a private, secure elevator that went to the sub-basement. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her voice trembling slightly. "To see my grandmother," he said, his voice tight. "She is the only one who has been with the family long enough to know who had access to the vault before my father died." Gianna Moretti was waiting for them in a small, lavishly appointed sitting room that served as her private office. The walls were lined with old photographs, a visual history of the Moretti family's rise to power. She listened to their discovery in silence, her face grim. "So," she said finally, tapping her cane on the floor, "the rot is in the roots. I always suspected." "Who, Gianna?" Dante demanded, his control fraying. "Who had access? Who could have switched the stones?" Gianna looked at a photograph on the wall. It was a picture of a younger Gianna, her late husband, and two other men. One was a giant of a man with a kind face. The other was lean and sharp, with intelligent, calculating eyes. "Your father's generation was a triumvirate," Gianna said, her voice heavy with memory. "There was your father, Alessandro, his younger brother, your uncle, Lorenzo, and their most trusted advisor, a man named Arturo Bianchi. They ran everything together. Arturo was the brains. He was the one who designed the vault, who cataloged the assets, who knew every secret. He died of a heart attack 15 years ago, or so we were told." She pointed a gnarled finger at the lean, sharp-faced man in the photo. "His son, Luca Bianchi, is now the family's chief financial officer. He runs all the legitimate businesses. He has access to everything. If the stone was switched before it was given to the Contis for safekeeping, it was either Lorenzo or Arturo who did it. And Lorenzo died in a boating accident 10 years ago." Dante stared at the photograph, a storm of betrayal and fury in his eyes. "Luca," he breathed. "He's been with me for 10 years. He's my godfather's son. He's family." "Family is often the sharpest knife," Gianna said, her voice laced with ancient sorrow. "Luca Bianchi has the access, the knowledge, and the motive. He's been siphoning money from the legitimate businesses for years. I'm sure of it. He's been waiting for the right moment to use the code, to access the Zurich vault and dismantle everything your grandfather built." Elena, who had been listening silently, spoke up. "The code on the diamond. It's not just a key to a vault, is it? It's a key to a ledger, a record of every transaction, every deal, every secret the family has ever made." Gianna looked at her with newfound respect. "You are as smart as you are beautiful, child. Yes, the Zurich vault holds the founding documents of the Moretti Empire, the promises made, the debts owed, the blood oaths sworn. Whoever holds that ledger controls the family. They could blackmail every politician, judge, and businessman who has ever done business with us. They could start a war." The stakes were now terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just about a stolen diamond. It was about the survival of the Moretti family. And Luca Bianchi, the man they trusted with their financial empire, was the architect of their destruction. The plan was set in motion that night. They couldn't just accuse Luca Bianchi without proof. He was too well protected, too integrated into the family's legal structure. They needed to catch him in the act. They needed to find the real diamond. Dante's strategy was a masterpiece of deception. He would announce a sudden, urgent trip to Zurich, claiming he needed to personally audit the vault after the unfortunate incident with the Conti family. He would take his core security team with him, leaving Chicago seemingly vulnerable. It was a trap. They knew Luca would have to act. With Dante supposedly out of the country, he would have a narrow window to retrieve the real diamond from wherever he had hidden it, and make his own move on the Zurich vault. Elena was to be the bait. Dante's public story would be that he was taking his new gemological consultant with him to Zurich to verify the other assets. In reality, Elena would stay behind, hidden in Gianna's private quarters, monitoring a sophisticated surveillance system they would install in Luca's office and home. "It's too dangerous," Dante said, his voice tight with a worry he couldn't disguise. They were in his private study, the Chicago skyline glittering coldly outside the window. "If he suspects anything, if he finds you—" "He won't," Elena said, her voice firmer than she felt. "He doesn't see me. Remember? I'm just the fat appraiser who got lucky. I'm not a threat. I'm invisible. That's my superpower, isn't it? She offered him a small, sad smile. Dante crossed the room in 3 swift strides and took her face in his hands. The gesture was possessive, desperate, and tender all at once. You are not invisible, he growled, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. You are the most visible, the most vital person in my world right now. If anything happens to you, he couldn't finish the sentence. The vulnerability in his eyes was a raw, open wound. Elena's heart cracked open. She reached up and covered his hands with her own. Nothing will happen to me. I've been underestimated my whole life. It's time I used it to my advantage. Let me do this. Let me help you save your family. He looked at her for a long moment, a war raging in his eyes. Then, slowly, he leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. It was a kiss of reverence, of fear, of a promise he couldn't yet speak aloud. Stay safe, he whispered against her skin. That is an order. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of staged activity. Dante's convoy of black SUVs made a very public departure for the private airfield, with a woman in a dark wig and an emerald dress, a decoy for Elena, ushered into the lead car. The real Elena was already hidden in the sub-basement with Gianna, surrounded by a bank of high-definition monitors. The surveillance feeds were live. They showed Luca Bianchi's corner office in the Moretti Tower, his elegant townhouse, and the interior of his private study at home. For the first 24 hours, there was nothing. Luca went about his business, a picture of calm, competent professionalism. Elena began to doubt. Had they been wrong? Then, on the second night, it happened. At 2 a.m., a motion sensor tripped in Luca's home study. Elena, who had been dozing in a chair, snapped awake. On the monitor, she saw Luca, dressed in dark clothes, enter the study. He went to a large, antique globe in the corner, a decorative piece Elena had noticed before. He tilted the globe on its axis, and the top half swung open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small, unassuming black velvet pouch. Luca pulled it out, and from it, he took a diamond. Even on the grainy night vision footage, Elena could see it. The fire, the life, the soul of a genuine, historic stone. The real Moretti diamond. He has it, Elena breathed into the microphone that connected her to Dante's jet, which had quietly turned around and was now on a private tarmac just outside the city. He's taken the bait. He's moving. We're on our way. Dante's voice crackled back, tight with adrenaline. Do not engage. Do not let him see you. But as Elena watched, a new horror unfolded. Luca didn't leave the house. He walked to his desk, turned on a high-powered lamp, and pulled out a jeweler's loupe. He was going to read the code. He was going to photograph it, transmit it to his buyer, the architect, and the damage would be done even if they caught him. The ledger would be compromised. He's reading the inscription, Elena whispered, panic clawing at her throat. Dante, he's going to send the code. We'll be too late. There was a moment of static-filled silence. Then Gianna's voice, sharp and commanding, cut through. Then we must stop him now. Child, you know this house better than any guard. The old servants' passages. They connect to his townhouse. They were built in my husband's time. I will show you the way. No. Dante's voice was a roar over the comms. Absolutely not. Elena, you stay where you are. But Elena was already on her feet, her heart pounding a war drum against her ribs. This was her moment. The moment where she stopped being a passive observer and became the heroine of her own story. She looked at Gianna, who was already pointing a gnarled finger towards a seemingly solid bookshelf. There's a latch behind the red leather book, Gianna said. The tunnel leads directly to a false wall in his wine cellar. Go. I will guide you. Elena didn't hesitate. She ignored Dante's furious, desperate commands in her ear, and pulled the latch. A section of the bookshelf swung inward, revealing a dark, dusty corridor. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow and cold, the air thick with the smell of old stone and secrets. Cobwebs brushed her face, and she could hear the scurrying of unseen things in the walls. But she pressed on, her fear a cold, hard knot in her stomach, her determination a fire in her chest. She emerged through a cleverly disguised panel into Luca Bianchi's wine cellar. The house was silent. She crept up the stairs, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the wood. The door to the study was slightly ajar, a sliver of bright light spilling into the dark hallway. She could see Luca at his desk, his back to her, a digital microscope connected to his laptop. He was muttering to himself, reading the code aloud as he typed. G72B. Elena knew she had seconds. She couldn't physically overpower him, but she could outsmart him. She pulled out her phone, not to call for help, but to use her own weapon. She opened her gemological database app and quickly typed in a command. She took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and walked into the room. Luca spun around, his face a mask of shock that instantly morphed into a cold, dangerous sneer. He was a handsome man in his late 40s, with the same sharp, intelligent eyes as his father in the photograph. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice dripping with false calm. "What an unexpected surprise. I thought you were on a plane to Zurich." "The stone you're holding," Elena said, her voice remarkably steady. "It's a fake." Luca laughed, a short, ugly sound. "A nice try, but I've just verified the inscription. It's the real Moretti diamond. You're a talented appraiser, but you're out of your depth, little girl." "Am I?" Elena said, taking a step closer. "You're reading the code, G72B9, but you're missing the prefix. The real code has a 2-letter prefix, micro-lasered inside the G. It's invisible unless you know to look for it with a specific wavelength of UV light. The code you're reading is a decoy, a trap left by the original patriarch for just this occasion. The real code is in my head, and the stone you're holding, I can prove it's a fake, just like I did at the party." It was a colossal bluff. The stone was real, and she knew it. But Luca didn't. Doubt flickered in his eyes. He looked from the diamond to her, his confidence wavering. He had seen her expose the fake at the engagement party. He knew her reputation. "You're lying," he hissed, but his voice was less certain. "Test it," Elena challenged, holding his gaze. "Breathe on it. Put it in water. You have a loop. Look for the synthetic flux lines. You'll see them. The architect played you, Luca. He gave you a fake, just like Conti gave us. You're not the mastermind. You're just another pawn." The insult, the suggestion that he was a fool, was perfectly aimed. With a snarl of rage and uncertainty, Luca grabbed a glass of water from his desk and plunged the diamond into it, just as Elena had done days before. The moment his focus was on the glass, Elena moved. She didn't try to fight him. She lunged for his laptop and, with a swift, decisive keystroke, executed the command she had cued on her phone. A powerful, custom-designed virus, a gift from Marco's tech team, flooded his system. The screen flickered and went black. The file containing the photograph of the code was corrupted, encrypted, and locked. The transmission was stopped. Luca roared in fury, realizing he had been tricked. The diamond was real, and she had just played him for a fool. He dropped the glass, which shattered on the floor, and lunged at her, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. "You fat, meddling bitch!" he screamed, his hands reaching for her throat. Elena stumbled back, but before Luca could touch her, the study door exploded inward. Dante Moretti filled the doorway, a terrifying, avenging angel. His face was a cold mask of lethal fury, and in his hand was a gun, held loosely, but with unmistakable intent. Marco and two other men were right behind him. The air in the room turned to ice. "Luca," Dante said, his voice a quiet, deadly whisper that was more frightening than any shout. "Step away from her." Luca froze, his hands still outstretched. The color drained from his face. He knew, in that instant, that his life was over. "Dante, I can explain. She's lying. It's a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding," Dante said, walking slowly into the room, his eyes never leaving Luca, "was mine. I trusted you. You were family, and you betrayed that family for greed." He stopped a few feet away. "Marco, secure the diamond, and take Mr. Bianchi to the warehouse. We have a long conversation ahead of us." Marco moved forward, carefully picking up the real Moretti diamond from the desk and pocketing it. Two other men grabbed Luca, who had begun to weep, a pathetic, broken sound. As they dragged him from the room, Dante finally turned to Elena. The fury in his eyes was instantly replaced by a storm of other emotions: fear, relief, and a profound, terrifying love. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a gentle embrace. It was a desperate, crushing, full-bodied claim. One hand pressed flat against her back, the other tangled in her hair, holding her head against his chest. She could feel the frantic hammering of his heart against her cheek. "You disobeyed a direct order," he growled into her hair, his voice shaking. "You could have been killed. You walked into a room, alone, with a traitor." "I stopped him," Elena whispered into his chest, her own body trembling with the release of adrenaline. "I saved the code. I saved your family." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. His eyes were blazing. "You are the most infuriating, courageous, brilliant woman I have ever met," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "You are not just under my protection, Elena. You are my heart. Do you understand that? You are my heart. And you walked into a room with a killer." He cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away tears she didn't know she was shedding. "Everyone saw a shiny stone. But you saw the truth. You saw the betrayal. You saw the code. And you saw me. The real me. Not the boss. Not the monster. Just a man who was about to lose everything, until a curvy jeweler, with a genius mind and a lion's heart, saved him." He leaned his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with hers. "I am never letting you go. You are mine, Elena Vance. My equal, my partner, my everything." And when he kissed her, it was not a gentle kiss. It was a vow, a branding, a promise of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. It was a kiss that tasted of danger, of relief, and of a love forged in the fire of betrayal. In the aftermath, the Moretti empire was quietly and ruthlessly restructured. Luca Bianchi disappeared from public life, his name erased from every company record. The real Moretti diamond, its code now safely deciphered by Elena, was returned to Gianna, who wore it with a fierce, quiet pride. The Zurich vault was secured, the family's legacy protected. Elena did not go back to her old life. She couldn't. She had seen too much, done too much, and been seen too completely. She became the head of the Moretti family's asset verification division, a position created specifically for her. She had a lab that was the envy of every gemological institute in the world, and a team of experts who respected her for her mind, not her dress size. And she had Dante. Their love was not a soft, easy thing. It was a force of nature, a collision of two powerful souls. He was still the dangerous, possessive boss of a mafia empire, and she was still the woman who could see the truth in a world of lies. But together, they were unbreakable. One evening, months later, they stood on the balcony of the penthouse, watching the city lights flicker to life. Dante's arm was wrapped around her waist, his hand resting on the curve of her hip, with a familiar, possessive ease. "I have a gift for you," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Not a diamond. You have enough of those." He handed her a small, flat box. Elena opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant brass nameplate. It read, "Elena Vance Moretti, Chief Gemological Officer," and below that, in smaller script, a single line. She saw the truth. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "It's perfect." "No," he said, pulling her closer, his gaze intense and full of a love that still took her breath away. "You are perfect, my brilliant, beautiful, curvy little appraiser, the woman who was mocked for her size, and who brought an empire to its knees with her mind. Everyone else saw a shiny object. You saw the truth, and you saw me." He kissed her, a long, slow, possessive kiss that promised forever, and Elena, the curvy jewelry appraiser who had once been invisible, kissed him back, a queen in her dangerous, glittering kingdom, finally, completely, and irrevocably seen.